I mean, now it's kind of like in order to explain certain like slang or certain trends on social media, though, it's kind of like almost impossible to start somebody off like explain it from the very beginning because there's just so many layers of technical changes to the slang over the years and whatnot. So how do you approach that when you're working for a major publication where you don't know if the person reading it is going to be somebody who's like super TikTok fluent or, my mom who really needs everything explained to her?
I know. I mean, most of the places that I write for are it's an older audience,
Mm.
like if you look at the comments of my articles. So I'm writing in a sort of more basic way, but I generally give credit. I mean, people always say boomers are not online. Nobody spends more time on Facebook with like minion memes and stuff than like boomer. Like they do use
Mm.
the internet. So I think we don't have to talk down to them, but it depends how I talk about my stories. Like the actual article might be written for like a little bit of a person that's not as familiar. But then when I take that article and share the news on TikTok or YouTube or I make content about it, I'm usually just talking to my audience, which is mostly young people.
Right, because I was reading something the other day about how there's like just such a race on TikTok to come up with names and identifying, labels for things that are happening in society. And there's just all these things that were consistently happening throughout history that never had a name. But now there's like a real competition to name those things, like even the trad moms and the trad wives and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which my whole life I would have thought of as just being like a regular mom. But now that's like a real label. And once you have a label, that allows you to argue efficiently and like go at other groups of people and stuff. And like a lot of that work is almost stuff that would have had to be explained to people through media prior, and it's just like such a strange state of affairs that we've gotten to, right?
Yeah. Well, I think all those TikTokers realize what like media realized a long time ago, which is that if you come up with like a catchy name
Mm.
or you can sort of articulate a trend, that allows, like you said, people to talk about it and it generally pops. Like it'll get a certain amount of traction because people are
Mm.
like, oh, I know that. Like, oh, I know what a beige mom is or a coastal grandmother or
Yeah, so you
whatever.
got way better examples right there. Coastal grandmother.
That's like a whole aesthetic. But I do think it's led to this obsession with content creators just sort of like desperately like trying to come up and sort of manufacture these things where it's like some of them they're really reaching.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with this constantly in the rap world where it's like the people who are coming up as content creators are just like without realizing that this is what they're doing, they're just grasping at any strain of drama in larger creators'
Yes.
content for them to grasp onto and grab and try to find some kind of narrative. And I get it because it really is probably the only way that they're going to be able to get noticed is by taking bigger creators and putting them in their content and stuff. But it's weird to see them doing this without seeming to have any kind of self-awareness about what they're doing and how weird it is.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's just like age-old internet is like if you want attention, you got to go after somebody bigger than you because if they acknowledge you or they respond to you or whatever, that like raises your clout and then suddenly you're in the mix and
Mm.
you know.
Definitely. So, okay, what does something have to, in terms of like a TikTok trend or like a style of content or a certain creator, in your mind, like what level do they have to reach in order to be worth writing about in a major publication? Because there's so many people that I'll get emails about like, do you want to interview this TikTok girl? And it's like she has 9 million followers, and I'm just digging and digging, trying to figure out like what could be the thing that makes her interesting. And there's really not much there.
She's
And I'm sure,
hot.
yeah, it's usually the hot thing, but it's like dudes too. Like, but
Yeah.
to me, it's kind of like, well, what separates Bryce Hall from like these 10 other hot dudes with floppy hair that I don't know about? Shout out to
Yeah.
Bryce because I mean, someone like him, he's got enough personality, but I also wouldn't say that he rises to the occasion of being like a Washington Post article because unless there was some extreme drama or
I think I
something.
wrote about Bryce's power getting turned off when he was partying in 2020.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah.
that was a good era. Yeah. Okay, I remember that.
So
Yeah.
he was in the New York Times, but no, I mean, I think like for me, it's not as much the size of the audience. It's more like what does their rise say about the internet or some platform or the content creator industry or like the entertainment landscape. So it's like, with like, did you see the Who the F Did I Marry TikTok drama at all?
Oh,
This 50-part series. That
yeah,
this
I
woman
didn't
did.
watch any of it, but I read some explainers about it. Yes.
It was this like 8-hour long thing, but it's like that woman doesn't have that many followers. She had under 1 million as of a day ago, but like she created this long form interesting series. So it's like you might write about it because that's interesting, like doing long form content on TikTok. Or I'm writing a story right now on. Do you know what retention editing is?
Like Mr. Beast and
Yes,
everything.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
something happens every there's a bunch of creators that are not Mr. Beast level, but they sort of pioneered that style, and so it's like they're relevant in the context of that story. So for me to write about someone, it's like, what does this person's popularity or what is their content, like, what's interesting? What is like, what's the lesson that you can learn from it, or like, what's the interesting kind of thing from it? So they don't have to be big.
Reading about the retention editing thing really makes me feel like an idiot because I've just been doing podcasts and just putting them out at any length, and then I start to realize like, oh. There's people who are really studying that if you put something out that's 2 minutes and 59 seconds, then that's going to do significantly better than something that's 3 minutes. And I'm like, holy shit. But I also like, I think you just have to draw a line in the sand somewhere and be like, this is not why I started making content, to just like optimize for viewership. But I don't know. Like, I mean, do you think Mr. Beast can transcend past YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, I know I reported a little bit on his Amazon Prime deal that's
Right.
in the works. Like, yeah, he's so big, and I mean, he's got staff of hundreds, and like he's really running an entertainment empire. Imagine the way that Coco Melon has. I mean, Coco Melon has a streaming deal now. Like, Coco Melon's obviously another children's
Right.
thing.
We agreed early on to not let our kid watch that because it just
It's like
felt.
crack.
Yeah, it's just too much.
Yeah,
When you
it's-
compare that to her watching like Sesame Street, which you still see the effect that even a relatively laid back show has on their brain, and it's like a
Yeah.
fucking lobotomy taking place right in front of your eyes when you see the way that they just can't look away from it.
It's disturbing. I
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I mean, Mr. Beast is like a genius at what he does, and that's the reason he does it. I think that, like, unfortunately, he spawned this is what my retention story is edited is about. Is like, he spawned all these copycats where, like, I think people think that they can just growth hack their way to audience. And let's not forget that Mr. Beast also started years ago. You know, like, he really studied YouTube, and he brought in that wave of like kindness content. Like, he was one of the first to really start doing that, like, charity based.
Donating to people with 0 viewers on Twitch.
Yeah.
And yeah, but even the weird like saying Logan Paul's name 100,000 times
Yeah,
and
those
like that.
stunts, yeah.
Which is like very easy to forget about that
Yeah.
era. It wasn't that long ago that this guy who we all know now for doing one thing was doing this completely separate thing.
Yeah, and he was just trying things out and like working really hard, and you know, it's gotten to him to where he's gotten, and I think he seems pretty great at what he does, you know.
I do see a bunch of people trying to push the like Mr. Beast is slowly shrinking narrative, which I don't know if I really go for that. I think that if anything, the pandemic accelerated like a lot of his content. The Squid Games thing was just
Yeah.
obviously such a viral idea. But I do think it's correct to question like, to what extent is he successful because of learning to play by the rules of YouTube, and is he going to necessarily be able to take that outside? But I think that Amazon show is going to be the ultimate litmus test, right?
Totally. And I think it's like there's a bad track record, obviously, of like YouTubers trying to do TV stuff, but the show is supposed to be a competition show, which he could do. You know, like, it's like enough in line with his content. I don't think he could host a talk show. I don't think he could, like, I don't know that he'd be that great at that, but I think he's good at what he does, which is essentially viral competition stuff. So we'll see. I know everyone wants to kind of also, once someone peaks, be like, oh, they're on the downcline. You know,
They
they're-
want to be the first one to call out the fall off.
Exactly.
Yes.
But it's like he's also maxed out to a point. I mean, he's got a massive audience. Like, he's never going to continue to grow at the rate that he has been growing. It's just unsustainable.
And once you drive a freight train into a giant dirt pit, it's kind of like, okay, maybe we've gotten to the point where like, I don't know where you're going to take this from now on. And you certainly, it doesn't seem like you could take it in like a really simple direction, whereas like in the beginning so many of his ideas were so basic and he just executed them really well.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.